Kimberly Robinson, Supreme Court reporter with Bloomberg Law. Kimberly Robinson, the president set up a White House commission to investigate possible structural changes to the Supreme Court. Remind our viewers what led to this commission.
Well, I think that really depends on who you ask, but I do think that part of what was behind appointing this commission was some of the rancor that we've seen surrounding Supreme Court confirmations in the past few years. In particular, in 2016, we saw, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hold open the seat, saying that it was an election year and the public should really be able to have a say in who's going to pick the next Supreme Court justice. But then fast forward to just last year when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed and Republicans filled the seat despite the fact that the election was just a month away. And so I think there was a lot of angst from progressives surrounding those circumstances and some push to make some changes to the Supreme Court and be more responsive to what they see as the American voters' kind of desires to see who goes on the Supreme Court. And so that was really pushing it. I do think progressives really see this commission, though. They saw it at the start and now, once we have this final report, as kind of a way to kick the can kind of down the road so that President Biden, who doesn't seem to favor a lot of these structural changes, can kind of wait before making any decisions on them.
The commission had a final vote of this report. What were the highlights of it?
Well, I think it's really important to note that this report was not meant to make any recommendations to the president to adopt any changes. So there's not any recommendations in there that, they impose any term limits or they expand the number of court. Instead, it's more of a tool for people who are going to be, Congress, who's going to be writing legislation, for the public who wants to be more informed about this. And so it's really more of a book report, kind of the highlights of, what are the pros and cons of the different proposals.
What happens next then with this report? What will the president do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we saw White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki say she doesn't really know what's going to happen yet. The president will review this report, and then there's really no expectation of what's going to follow next. I do think with some of the things that the Supreme Court is considering this term, there's going to be a lot of pressure from progressives to actually take this report and do some of those structural changes, whether it be legislation in Congress or a push to adopt a constitutional amendment. I do think there's going to be some pressure from progressives in that way.
From the report on expanding the court, they wrote, although there is widespread agreement among legal scholars that Congress has the constitutional authority to expand the court's size, there is profound disagreement over whether court expansion at this moment in time would be wise. We do not seek to evaluate or judge the weight of any of these arguments, and the Commission takes no position on the wisdom of expansion. Profound disagreement, Kimberly Robinson, explain.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, one of the things that really emerged from this report is that kind of the most controversial changes that could be made, this idea of expanding the number of justices on the court, is really one of the easiest things that can be accomplished. It's something that, as we heard, the report says Congress has the authority to do and has done in the past, but it's one of the least agreed upon things. And then we take the flip side of that, something like term limits, which has a really broad purchase from conservatives and progressives, but that's actually one of the hardest things to do. And so that's one of the things that really emerged from this report. With regard to expanding the court, I think the cons that the report really lists is, what do we do if you're looking at it from from progressive standpoints? What do you do when a conservative is in office and when they take over the House and Senate? Is it just going to be tit for tat? We're just going to get to a point where we have 40 justices on the Supreme Court, and really, what is going to be the long-term implications of expanding the court?
What types of proposals were given on term limits?
Well, I think there are many different ways that you could accomplish term limits. Kind of the one principal proposal that had the most purchase seems to be this idea of having staggered 18-year terms, where the idea is that each president gets 2 appointments per term, and the thought is that it will really lower the stakes of each individual nomination to the Supreme Court, and maybe kind of lower the temperature in Congress. But whether or not that can be done via legislation or if it's going to take a constitutional amendment is really hotly debated, and I think at this point a constitutional amendment is something really hard to accomplish.